Hey everyone, welcome to lesson 3 of Illustrator Classroom in a Book 2024 edition. Today we're going to take a look at creating and editing shapes and some logo creation using basic shapes. So pretty straightforward stuff here. We're just going to kind of get into actual creation of objects rather than editing existing stuff. So first thing we want to do is obviously jump in onto the weekly assignments and grab underneath lesson 3 those start files. There's also an extension project this week, the shape-based logo, and I'll walk you through that after we're done with today's lesson. I have a couple support things here, just a couple other videos. So if you want to take a look at some additional tools and techniques, that's also available for you. It's not covered in the lesson, but it's just a little bit of an extension piece for you if you're interested. So got my files ready to go here on my desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and open this lesson 3 flyer.ai. Now, this is kind of an interesting one because now what we're going to do is we're going to edit on this. This is going to be kind of our final piece. This is where we're going to see our final finished objects. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have an other area to work in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an entirely new document, do all my editing of something completely new with the shape tools in that. And then when I'm done, I'll bring it over into this document for final kind of edits and final object things that we're going to create with it. So in order to make a new document, it's pretty straightforward. You go to your File, New menu. And there's a couple different things that are set for you. So it'll remember your recent document sizes, but notice along the top here, there's kind of some presets. So like if you're looking for building out, like say you're doing like mock-up stuff for an iPhone or standard screen size stuff for the web. There's a setup for print, film and video, art illustration, templates, all sorts of stuff there for you. Now, what I want to take a look at is underneath print. Thing you want to keep in mind is as you're kind of grabbing these different ones, there's different settings that are going to be built in for you. Now, you don't have to use these presets. You can actually go in and enter your own. So like say that I don't want to work in points. That doesn't mean anything. I want to work in inches. I can change that dimension. And I want to make an 8-inch by 8-inch document. My orientation's fine. I only want one artboard. Notice you can add additional artboards. And there's also this thing called bleed. Bleed is extra area that it'll add to the outside edge. So say that you had full color going to all 4 sides. Normally when you print that, you print extra color and then the printer trims that extra color off so that you don't end up with like a little gap of white along the edge of your document if the printer couldn't quite hit that area. So if you want to add bleed, that's fine. We don't need it for this. I just want to kind of introduce you to the idea of it. And then also notice down here, there's color mode and raster effects. Now the color mode makes a difference again if you're printing. There's 2 primary modes you're going to work in. CMYK is for print. That's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Those are the 4 colors of ink that you'd see like if you had like an at-home printer. But that's generally what you'd see when you send this out for print. So if you are designing something that's going to be printed by like a commercial printer, you always want to design in RGB or CMYK. Things that go for screen are RGB. Red, green, and blue, those are the colors of the light. Now, there are more kind of letters in CMYK, but there's actually more colors in the spectrum underneath the RGB color mode. Generally, when I design in RGB and I convert back to CMYK if it's going to be printed, but that's more of a Photoshop thing. When you're working in Illustrator, it's actually pretty smart with how it handles color and how it handles gradation. So I'm going to just leave it at CMYK. I can also change the effects. Normally, when you're looking at this, there's kind of some magic numbers. This is usually the print 300 dots per inch or pixels per inch. Screen resolution, like what you normally see on a screen, is 72. That's the magic number. If you go any bigger than that, what it ends up doing is creating a bigger file size than your screen can actually display. So for this, because it is print, I'll leave it at high. But again, 8 inches by 8 inches. I have my bleed turned off, but if you want to turn it on, no big deal. And then again, CMYK color. So when I click create, here's that bleed area. So notice that my artboard has that extra little gap. So really whenever I'm designing with bleed, I always want to make sure that if I have an object that say like on our last lesson, how there was that black background of the postcard, I'd actually want to stretch that out to this bleed area off the edge of the artboard so that when it prints, it will have that extra bit that will just get trimmed off. Now, with this document, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start using some of our shape tools, and our primary shape tools are going to be over here. So if I zoom in on my artboard here, see my rectangle. I'm actually not going to really use my rounded rectangle because they've built in so many good tools to make you or give you the ability to round those off. There's an ellipse or circle tool, a polygon tool, which lets me make all different shapes, different sided shapes. A star tool, which I can add all different points to. The flare tool, I don't know why it still even exists. I literally haven't used it probably in 20 years. I think it's like kind of a legacy tool. We're not going to use it in the lesson, but if you want to play around with it, feel free. So starting off with the rectangle tool, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just drawing a basic shape. So when I draw a rectangle, I can draw it to any size. Now, if I want, I can click underneath my properties and I can see how big this is. X and Y is where it is on the artboard, but width and height shows me how big this is. So this is 2.4 inches wide, 1.8 high. I actually have a specific size that I want to go to. So I'm going to dump this out of here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this thing by, instead of clicking and dragging, just clicking once and it actually prompts me to say, hey, how big do you want this? I'm going to make it 2.3 by 1.3. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this. I'm going to turn off my stroke. You see how there's this red strike through? If I click on my drop-down box up here, it shows me all my different color options, but this red strike through is none. So now there is no stroke on that. And for my color, I'm going to set it to kind of this light brown color. What we're going to end up doing is kind of taking some real crude shapes and turning it into like a little bear guy. So this is going to be, make sure I grab the right tool with my move tool. This is going to be its head, and I'm going to need to make another box that's going to be its body. So I'll again click, and my next one, for this one, I'm going to make this thing 4.6 inches wide. And for my height, I'll set this at 2.9. So I've got kind of these two boxes, and this is going to be kind of my very crude start to my bear. I've got the body, the head. So far, so good. I don't really like how my shapes look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to kind of play around with that. And what I want to do is I want to start rounding these corners, but I'm going to do these a couple different ways. First way, on this main body, if I have a regular selection tool, and we've seen this before, I can select this entire object. And if I make a change on one of these little anchor points here, these curvature points, it'll add a nice curvature to it evenly across all of them. So I'm going to make mine about 0.8, 0.9, somewhere in there. There's no exact answers on any of these. It's really just kind of playing around and getting comfortable with what the tools are. So if yours comes out and looks a little bit different than mine, don't worry about it. It's really just about getting comfortable with the tools and playing around with it. Don't worry about the exact numbers. Now, I have this set for the body, and that's fine if he's rounded on all those edges, but on this head piece, it's not going to look quite right for the kind of the style I'm going for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the direct selection tool so that I can grab these points individually. Now, on this bottom anchor point, I'm just going to click on this one first so that this one is selected and all my other radius points are gone. I'm going to bring this way in, kind of give him a little nose. And then I'm going to click on this corner up here, and I'm going to bring this back and kind of give him a little bit of like a neck area. And that gives me kind of a nice shape. And now it's starting to look a little bit like something. We still got obviously a little bit of stuff to do, but we'll play around with that and kind of take a look at how we can change that. Now, I also want to build another piece, and what I think I'm going to do is I need like a belly shape for him. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at how I can play around with different types of edges. So I'm actually just going to select this main body type, copy paste it, and I'm going to play around with settings on here. I'm going to bring these edges back in a little bit, maybe to about here, and I'm going to shrink this in maybe to about that width there. I'll bring this up a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to take a look at underneath the properties. So now that I have this properties panel open, remember it's this one right here, or I can always go up to my window menu and go down to properties. That'll pull that open. And here I can click on these little more options, and it actually shows me different types of angles that I can put on the corner. Right now I'm just set to normal rounded corners, but I can set it to this cut in. I can set it to this chamfered edge. And I actually like that. I think I'm going to use that for those top right sides. And then I can change how much that goes in on each side. So maybe I'll turn this up to maybe 0.5. And I'm going to make them even here. And on this bottom one, I'm actually going to turn that off. I'll just leave that as just a block here. I'm going to use this, but I'm going to come back to this piece when we learn a little bit more about how to kind of add things or pieces inside of other pieces. So now that I got that piece taken care of, I've taken a look at kind of how that all works with some of the basics of my rectangle tool. I want to move on to my ellipse tool. So for the ellipse tool, again, I'm going to press and hold inside where my rectangle tool is, and I'm going to come down to this ellipse tool. Again, same idea here. I can click and drag and make any kind of oval, but I want to make a perfect circle. So if I hold my shift key and click and drag, it'll give me that exact circle. For this, what I want to do is I want to change my stroke because I'm going to make this look like an eye. So I'm going to make the fill white, and I'm going to make the stroke black. Now, on my stroke, there's a whole stroke appearance panel. So when I click on strokes, I can set caps, I can set corners, I can make it align to the center or to the outside or to the inside. So if I really zoom in on this, you'll see that, do that, grab my zoom tool. So with this selected, I'll turn on my stroke a little bit. And now you can see with my stroke settings, by clicking on this here, I can change where that stroke sits, inside, outside, center. I'll leave mine aligned to the center. I think that's probably fine. And again, in here, I can change this. Now, when I clicked on this, all it was doing was it was quick linking me to this stroke panel. And if you see a panel that doesn't have a lot of options on it, you can come to this top right corner and show options, and that's where all those additional pieces were. But again, I like working out of this properties panel because there's so much that it quick links you to as far as being able to change things. So I've got one part there. I've got the kind of the outer eye. Now what I want to do is make a pupil for this thing. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my shift key and click. I think that looks probably pretty good, but I want this pupil to be black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that stroke to none. I'm going to change this fill to black, and I'll drag it inside of here, and I'll just put it right in the middle. I won't make him look too crazy, like his eyes are going all over the place. And because I've got two objects that I want to kind of link together, I'm going to go ahead and make them a group. So now that they're grouped, I can zoom out on the page, and looking at this is probably going to be a little bit ridiculous, like probably way too big of an eye. So I can always go in, and because they're grouped, hold my shift key and shrink them down a little bit, make them maybe look a little less crazy. Now, that's just the basics of working with circles. It's pretty much ovals or circles, right? Now, there is one other thing that you can do. With this, I'm going to draw one more shape, and I'll go a little bit bigger with this one. What I want to do is I want to make him an ear. Now, the question is, how am I going to make an ear out of a circle? Well, what I can do is I can make this thing into a half circle. So I'm going to zoom in on this tool. I'm going to set my color right away to that same light brown that I was using for the rest of his fur. And with the selection tool, notice how this little kind of piece pops out. It shows like a little moon icon. If I click and drag, it'll let me bisect that circle. Now, if I hold shift, it should lock it into even angles. I'm looking for 180. I wanted to get it right about there. And now, yeah, that's there, but I need to rotate it. So now I can rotate it maybe like this. And if I zoom back out, double clicking on the hand tool to zoom out, now I can place this guy up here. And I think that's looking pretty good. So I've got my eye, got my ear. I'm kind of moving along pretty well. What I really want to take a look at next is I want to knock out the last or another one of these tools. Now, this isn't in the shape tools. The next thing we're going to take a look at, if I zoom in here, is instead of using the shape tool, this ellipse tool, or any of these other ones, what I want to do is I want to take a look at this line tool. The line tool is kind of a weird one. I have had issues with this as far as like the usefulness of it, because really you can just use the pen tool to draw a line. But this is one instance that kind of works out kind of nicely. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a straight line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a stroke on here. So I'll turn on that same light brown. And what I'm going to do is I'm just keep turning this stroke way up. And I'm going to build him a little leg here. So I'll build this, and I'm just going to snap it right on there. And this is kind of a quick way of working. Now, one way, and again, you may use this, you may not. I just like that the ability to turn the stroke up or down to determine kind of how thick you want the line. Kind of a little bit faster way of working, but again, no right or wrong answer, just kind of what you like working with. I'm going to drag it down a little bit to make them just a little bit taller. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of this. Here's a nice keyboard shortcut. I'm working on a Mac, so I press Option. If I Option click on an object, it'll automatically make a duplicate and let me move it right over. So now I've got that one leg, and I made it into another leg. So again, nothing too crazy, just grabbing that line tool, turning on a stroke, and then turning up the thickness, and then copying and pasting it over. So getting back into our shape tools, what I want to take a look at now is here we've got rectangle, ellipse, polygon's the next one that we're going to take a look at. Now, with the polygon tool, this is kind of a fun one. There's a keyboard shortcut you're going to need to use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag, and it's going to default to whatever settings I had last. Now, you see this is like an object with a really big stroke. Remember, Illustrator is going to remember my settings from last time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this stroke off, and I'm going to turn the fill on of maybe a lighter color, just that lighter shade of brown. And let me try this again with that tool. Now, when I click and drag, yours might have started like a hexagon or pentagon. But what I'm doing is I'm pressing up and down on my keyboard arrow to add or subtract sides to this. Now, keep in mind, you're holding down your mouse as you go. So I want to go all the way down to a triangle. I'm going to make kind of like a little paw for him. So I'm going to size it down to probably right about there. And I think that looks pretty good as far as shaping and sizing. Let's put it in front of him and see. Yeah, I think that looks all right. The only thing I don't like is it's maybe a little too kind of shapy. It doesn't have like a very custom feel to it. So instead of using a standard shape, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to click on this dot here. I'm just going to throw a little radius right in that corner with my direct selection tool. Now it looks like he's got kind of a little bit more of a toe. It's a little bit more cute and kind of flows with the animation or the illustration style a little bit better. So I'm going to kind of nudge this into place. And then just like I saw before, I can use that Option key and click right in the middle and just drag out an exact duplicate and slide it right over onto the other foot. So we're seeing that again, using these shape tools and using that direct selection tool. We're starting off with basic shapes, but we're kind of able to customize them pretty easily. Now for the next part, what I want to take a look at is kind of adding some more, a little bit more detail to them. I want to add like a nose. I want to take this image and kind of use it as like a belly. But if I just drag this over here, it's kind of funky. So first I could obviously change the shade. I'll go lighter, but it's kind of weird and like the layering is kind of weird. Now, same thing here. Like I want to draw like a little circle spot, but if I just draw a circle, then it gives me a weird shape there too. What I want to talk about is drawing modes. So if you take a look here, we've actually been using a drawing mode the whole time, just the default one. This is the draw normal. So this just draws a shape or an object and just keeps stacking on top of each other. Now I've got this other one where I can just draw behind. So it automatically just draws stuff and layer things in front of it. Now I've also got this draw inside command, which will let me kind of draw a shape and lock it inside another shape, almost like a mask. So I'm going to click on that. And with this one selected, so make sure you have that object selected, if you click on this draw inside, I kind of see this weird like little checkered box around the outside end. Now I'm going to come back up into my shape tool, and I'm going to grab my ellipse tool. I'm going to set my color to black. Oop, and I have it selected. That's why it did that. So if I click away to deselect, you'll see because I had this selected, it still shows it. I'm going to click away so that it doesn't apply that style to it. I'm going to set my color to black. I'm going to set my shape to the circle. I'm going to kind of click and drag just over that end of his kind of snout there. And just like that, it applied it like a mask. Now, if I wanted to adjust it, make it bigger or smaller, maybe I wanted it to be a little longer towards the bottom of his nose or a little shorter, I can play with that. And when I double click away, it acts like a group that's all locked in one big piece. So same thing here. If I select this big belly piece here, I can do my draw inside mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this thing. So I'll do Command C or Edit Copy. And then when I select this object, I'm going to paste it and take a look. Now it lets me paste that shape right in here. So now I've got kind of like this little underside of him that I'll kind of position towards the middle of his legs, maybe right about there. And because I've already got this in here with a copy, I can delete that original. And now it's looking pretty good. I think the only thing this guy needs now is a tail. And we've looked at all but one of these tools in here. So what I want to look at last is this star tool. Star tool is pretty straightforward. It's really just like all the other tools. You click and drag, and look at that. It produces a bunch of points. Now, again, just like the Polygon tool, if I press down or up, it'll add points to that star. So it gives me kind of this weird one. I can press up or down. Now, as I'm holding my mouse down, one of the things that I can do is I can hold my command key, and it'll let me make this thing real pointy or real kind of short with the points. So I can play around with that a little bit and kind of adjust that to how I want it to look. You can make yours look however. I'm going to make my points a little bit smaller. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller as well by holding my shift key. I'm going to kind of throw it up here. And I think what I want to do is I'm going to arrange this thing. So when I arrange it, I'm going to send this to the back. So it's kind of just sitting off the back end of it. Now, this is my finished piece that I'm going to use for my other document. So now that it's done and I've got all these different shapes, I'm going to select everything. And I'm just going to go ahead and make this a group. So select that. And now I can select my group. I'm going to do a copy, Command C or Edit Copy command. And I'm going to jump back into this document and I'm going to paste them in. And because we had kind of a sense of size, the measurement looked good, I'm going to drop them kind of right up here, right kind of in front of the mountains. So I'm happy with how that looks. Now, I have a couple other pieces that I want to bring in here. Now, first thing we're going to take a look at is tracing. I want to warn you ahead of time, like this is obviously something you can just apply to everything, but if you trace too much stuff and you don't learn the pen tool, you don't learn the actual tools and editing the right way, everything's got a real traced look. There's certain filters, certain features, certain things that you see once you kind of get your hands around what Illustrator is, that you start seeing it out in the world and you're like, oh, somebody really cut a corner there. That looks traced, or somebody put a filter on that. So you kind of start noticing these things and they're weirdly kind of cheap looking, but they can be used really kind of consistently and nicely for certain applications. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to import an image of art. I've actually done this with clients in the past where they'll send me like a crappy old version of a logo and I got to scan it and bring it in and run a trace on it and clean up the lines and all that. That's essentially what we're going to do right here. Now, if you remember inside your folder, there is one other object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my file menu and go down here where it says place. I'm going to place another file inside this document. When you hit your place command inside the lesson 3, there's this lesson 3, hand drawn text.jpg. So I'm just going to place this, and this is just a flat JPEG file. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to trace this, and we're going to use the tracing command to knock that yellow out so we can bring this over here and put it inside of our document. What I want to do is I'm going to go to my window menu, and about halfway down, you'll see a thing called image trace. It's going to bring up a panel for us to work from. And what it does is it gives us options. So there's a bunch of preset things, and there's a bunch of options you can do. I'm going to kind of walk you through them. As far as preset goes, there isn't much to this, so I'm going to select 3 colors, but notice you can bring in like high quality photos or lower, sketched art, technical drawings. So if you're bringing in different types of things, these are kind of nice little default settings to get you started. When you select one, it's automatically going to apply a preview if you have this preview box checked. So when I select that preview, it shows me what it should look like once I do a trace. Now I can control colors, how many paths I want. I can kind of mess with all that. I can also tell it to ignore a color. So I don't want to include that yellow in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little color picker, and I'm going to select that. And now it's going to knock that yellow out of the tracing as well. So right now I think that looks pretty good. And notice that this is all a preview. Once I'm done with this, this is my result. I can hit this expand button, and now it converts this into lines. So now if I grab like my direct selection tool, that is now individual anchor points. You'll also notice I probably grabbed like a little piece up here. I'm actually going to select that with my direct selection tool and just hit delete twice to get rid of all of it. Now, on this selection, it looks good, but what I want to do is I want to clean up this path a little bit. There's a lot of points, and generally when you're looking at Illustrator files, less points is better because it gives you kind of smoother, cleaner lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go up to this object menu, and then I have a command called path simplify. And what this simplify is going to do is it should theoretically knock out the number of points and kind of smooth off and give me a little bit more crisp of a line. So like here, when I've got all these extra points, when I zoom in on this, you kind of get like weird little bumps and how this is kind of rounded off, and it's not as smooth as it could be. So again, if I go to that path simplify command and I start bringing this back, sometimes it's too simple, but sometimes it kind of cleans it up. And I think actually like right around maybe here is probably pretty good. Again, I'm not worried about being perfect. It's going to kind of flow with the style of the art. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this, now that it's all cleaned up and looking like I want it to, I'm going to drop it down here. And I want the color to be the same as this color down here. So I'm just going to grab my sample tool, and I'm just going to sample that right there. So not only did it grab the color, also notice how there's kind of like an opacity shift in this. It also selected that property as well. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. Now, last step I'm going to show you guys is called text to object. This is like the new AI stuff. I will warn you ahead of time. Yes, you can use AI to do all sorts of wonderful stuff. From what I've seen in Illustrator, the results kind of mileage varies pretty heavily. I highly recommend that you use this with a grain of salt. Like anybody can use these tools, but if you don't know how to edit them, clean them up, actually work with the software, it's only going to get you so far. So while I will show you how this works, I do want you to understand that like having a really strong knowledge of how the editing tools work, like we've seen so far, it's going to be incredibly helpful because yes, it will generate things for you, but they're not going to be exactly how you pictured them or maybe how you sketched them out. So with that in mind, just a little preamble. First thing I need to do in order to generate anything with AI is I need to give it a base shape. So I'm just going to click and just draw a box, right? Now, you probably have seen this floating around down here. They're very happy with this. This is always up. But what I want to do is I want to generate some vectors, right? So draw a box and you tell it what you want it to do. So when I select this, it's asking, well, what do you want to do? I want to do, let's do a shining sun with rays. Now, I've also got some options here. So here, is it a subject? Is it an icon? Is it a scene? I want this to be an icon, and I want to have very little detail. I want it to be kind of cohesive with my style. There's some other things here where like you can style reference other object areas. I'm not going to mess with that right now. There's additional settings that you can get into. I think this works for getting the basics down, just understanding that it's icon that we're building, that we're doing minimal detail, and then I'll hit the generate button. And what it's going to do is it's going to think for a second. Well, I'm pretty sure that's what I just told it to do right here. There we go. Oh, it was going, never mind. Sorry about that. It just was really slow. One of the drawbacks, and you'll probably see this in Photoshop more so if you're using any AI generation, is that it's really, really slow. It's really going to depend on your processing speed. What it's going to do now is it's going to generate 3 versions of whatever the prompt was that I gave it, and then it'll kind of let me select from that. So here's my variations, variation 1, 2, and 3. I can also use this to kind of click through. I kind of like this one the most. So what I'm going to do is just drag it over here. I can scale it up, holding my shift key, and then just place it into position. If I want to recolor or adjust anything on it, remember, it's going to appear as a group. So say that I wanted to select all these, and maybe I wanted to go to like a darker color there, so it pops out more. And then like this one, maybe these are all a different color, and maybe I'll go with, I don't know, a different shade of orange. But I can recolor these, but notice it does kind of some funky stuff. Like it wasn't even all the way around, like every other, it was missing a line here. So again, it's going to generate this stuff for you, but again, your mileage varies. It's not going to give you exactly what you want. Or if it does, it's not, maybe something's going to be a little funky with it, like how I've got this missing spot here. So that's the big idea. That's kind of what all the hoopla is about as far as AI. I don't think it's particularly awesome yet. I'm sure it's going to get better, but I do want you guys to understand how it works and what the kind of limitations are. So we are done with this lesson. What I'm going to do is go ahead and grab my artboard tool and just delete any extra artboards that I don't need. And then when I'm done, I'm going to stop and do a save as command. You'll save a version of this onto your desktop. So make sure I'm selecting that in PDF format, last name, and then you'll save it off there. Make sure you got that editing capabilities and you're good to go. You can email me that file along with the second step that we're going to take a look at right now, which is our extension project for the week. So if I jump back into Blackboard, it says here extension project, the shape-based logo. What you're going to do is you're going to create 3 versions of a custom logo for a shipping company on a 3" by 3" document using 3 artboards. So your logo should contain a standard shape, square, circle, polygon, a customized shape with that direct selection tool. Create some sort of shading, maybe create like an object and then create another one. So like how the bear had a nose or had the underside, that kind of thing. And then you're gonna make sure that you're applying fills or strokes to all objects. When you're done, you'll save all 3 versions and you'll save that along. And I know it says JPEG here, save it, so you can save it off as a PDF to me. So just give you a quick idea of getting up and running. You're gonna do your file new command. You're going to create a 3" by 3" document. You'll create 3 artboards. You don't need any bleed on these. I'll just hit create. And then again, just like we saw before, so say that we were going to make something for like a shipping company and I wanted it to look like a box and maybe I wanted to make it like a 3-dimensional thing. Maybe I'll start with this and I'll round in my edges a little bit. And then maybe I'll draw another shape. I'll just duplicate this one so I have the exact same size. And then maybe I'll take my direct selection tool and grab and pull this up to kind of give it, and my shape's got a little funky, but now I know I can grab these and adjust my anchor points and my handlebars. So I can drag them down and adjust them. And maybe that looks good. And I'll copy paste that. And I'll rotate it. And it looks like that's a little funky too. So again, I know I can just grab my direct selection tool and grab multiple points. Shift them over here and play with my anchors. And curve this in a little bit. So my box top's looking a little janky, but I can kind of, just for the sake of speed, I'll kind of rush through this a little bit. Obviously, I'll go back in and clean that up. I can start applying colors. So now if I'm going to go in and make this a box, I can go and grab my different shades of brown. Maybe I'll go darker on the sides and lighter on the top. And then if I wanted to do like some sort of shadow effect, maybe what I could do is copy paste this, make a light version, and maybe I'll do that draw inside command. Maybe I'll try and grab this select this and paste it inside that box. So I can play with kind of like some shading or some object adjustment. So again, I'm just going to kind of play around with all those different options. But again, this is really all about you guys coming up with whatever you think might be fun. So again, using these basic shapes, like how we built the bear, maybe it's something where you're going to draw something like a basic airplane, that type of thing. Really, there's no wrong answers. It's just playing around with the tools. If it looks like goofy or not 100% correct to you, that's fine. That's how people learn how to illustrate, by making a lot of weird, bad stuff. Don't think of it as bad. Think of it as this is how you're learning. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a first round of these things. When you're done, you'll save them off and send them over with this file to me. And then next week, we're going to learn a couple new tools, and then we're going to go back and we're going to refine those drawings with those new tools. So while my box looked really funky and wasn't quite right, we're going to learn some stuff on the next lesson. We're going to come back and we're going to clean these things up even further. So that's it for lesson 3. If you have any questions, of course, reach out via GChat or email, and I'll talk to you soon.